Hello mathematicians. Today's video is on identifying place value, and so our objective is students will be able to identify place value and translate words into numbers. As with any video, as we're going, if you have any questions, please make sure you write them down. If it's going too fast, please make sure you pause the video and resume it when you're ready. So the first thing we want to do is identify all the different place values that exist in a number. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and write them in, and then I want you to go ahead, pause the video, write in all the different place values. When you're ready, press play, and I'll go ahead and I'll kind of explain through what these different place values are going to mean. Okay, so when we're talking about numbers, one of the most important words to know when we're explaining place value is the word and. The word and is the word we use to signify where the decimal is. Any number that comes to the right of and, so any number to the right of and over here, those numbers are all going to have a T, H, S on the end. Sometimes it's really important that we pronounce these numbers and we really accentuate the THS, because that's going to remind us that these numbers to the right have a THS. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. Okay, that THS tells us that that number is coming on the right-hand side of the decimal. Any number to the left of the decimal, you can think of it as having a S. Now, depending on the tense that we're using, we might not have an S, but ones, tens, hundreds, okay? All those numbers have S's on the end. So if we had a big number, okay, each number, let's say we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we'll just repeat our numbers. 2, 3, 4, 5. Each of these different numbers has a different place value. For example, 9 is in this 9 right here is in the tenths place. This 2 is in the thousandths place. This 2 is in the millionths place. So we're going to talk today about how do you write out different numbers, how do you identify place value. Again, if you need a minute to copy anything down, pause the video. So let's go ahead and we're going to get right into some examples. So I'm going to give you an example, and let's say I gave you the example 13.04. So it's asking, what is the place value of the 1? Well, I noticed that the 1 is 2 places to the left of the decimal. So I'm going to come back up here to my chart. Here is my decimal. If I go 2 places to the left, I'm at the tens. So the place value of the 1 is the tens place with an S. What is the place value of the 3? Well, the 3 is 1 to the left of the decimal, so that's going to be the ones place. What is the place value of the 4? Well, the place value of the 4, that is 2 to the right of the decimal. That's going to be the hundredths place. And what is the place value of the 0? That's 1 to the right of the decimal, so that's going to be the tenths place. Now, a common mistake that you should watch for is a lot of times a misconception we have is we say, okay, well, 1 to the right of the decimal is the ones place. I'm sorry, 1 to the left of the decimal is the ones place. So 1 to the right, that must be the oneths place. Okay, the oneths place, that doesn't exist. On the left-hand side, you'll start with ones, but on the right-hand side, we skip right to tens. So what I want you to do is go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to try and do these 2 practices, practice 1 and practice 2. I'm going to write in the numbers for you so that you can practice. Let's have this first one be 70.24, and the second one is going to be 5.302. So go ahead and pause the video, write in the different place values, and press play when you are ready. Alright, go ahead and check your answers. something I really want to stress for us is notice that anything to the right of the decimal has a THS on the end. So for example, if we look at practice 1, this 2 is 1 to the right of the decimal. That is the tenths place. This 4 is 2 to the right of the decimal. That is the hundredths place. Anything to the right of the decimal is going to have a THS on the end of it. Alright, so let's keep going. We're going to do a little bit more practice. Alright, we're going to do one more practice. Okay, make sure that you've got it, and I'll show you the answer. For this one, we're going to try doing the number 6, 5, 4, 0, 7.19. Go ahead and pause the video and try to identify the place values of each of those numbers. Okay, here's your answers. Notice 1 to the right of the decimal, that's the tenths place with a THS, the tenths place. 1 to the left of the decimal, where the 7 is, that's only the ones. So remember, to the left we start with ones, to the right we start with tenths. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is how do you go from words? If I gave you something written out in words, a number written out in words, how would you transform that into a number? And we're going to write one quick key point before we talk about that, and that is two things. The word and means decimal. The word and means decimal. And the second thing we want to write down that's a key point is that last word tells place value. And I'll explain what that means in a second. Last word tells place value. So take a minute, copy that down, and pause the video if you need to. So let's go ahead and let's talk about our first example. So I've written out the first example for you. Go ahead and pause the video and copy down our first number. And you can write it all straight out. I just wrote 23 like that so it would fit. Our first example is how would we write 123 and 53 hundredths? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to look and just write out what we see. We see 123. So I'm going to write that out. 123. The word and is going to tell us we need a decimal. So I'm going to put a decimal. And then I see 53 hundredths. 53 hundredths. Now, the first thing I would do is go to the very last, after you write what's before the decimal and the decimal, go to that last word and say, okay, hundredths. How many places after the decimal is the hundredths place? I know that that is 2 places after the decimal. So I'm going to have to fill up 2 spots with a number. The number I'm going to fill that up with is the number 53. So I can go ahead and write that in to my 2 spots, 53. So our final answer would be, and I'm just going to rewrite it without the lines underneath, 123 and 53 hundredths. All right, let's go ahead and do a second example. Go ahead and pause the video and let's copy down our second example. 375 and 2 thousandths. 375 and 2 thousandths. Okay, so I'm going to write out what I see first. I see 375, so 375. I see the word and, so I'm going to put a decimal. And after the and, I'm going to look, what's the last word I see? The last word I see is thousandths, with a THS. So I'm asking myself, okay, how many places after the decimal is the thousandth place? I know that it goes tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So that's 3 places after the decimal. Now, I only see the number 2 here. And I know 2 is only one number. That's not big enough to fill in 3 different spots. So when that happens, and you only have maybe 1 or 2 numbers to fill in the 3 spots that you need, you're going to put it all the way at the end. So I'm going to write my 2 all the way at the end, and I'm going to fill in the other decimal places with zeros. So my final number, rewritten without the lines underneath, would be 375 and 2 thousandths. All right, let's do one more example. I'm going to move it down here. Okay, so again, we're going to say, write what we see first. We see 5,006. So 5,006. We see the word and. That's going to tell us to put a decimal. And then we see 32 10,000ths. So I'm going to think, how many place values after the decimal is 10,000? So I have tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. 4 places after the decimal. The number I'm going to fill that in with is 32. Now 32 is not going to fill up 4 spots. So I'm going to put 32 at the end. I'm going to fill in with 0 as before. So our number is going to be 5,006 and 30. Whoops. I forgot to put my zeros. And 32 10,000ths. Alright, I want you to try some practice. So go ahead and just try practices 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to have you do practice 1, 2, and 3. Go ahead, try those 3 practices, pause the video, and then when you're ready, press play, and you can see the answers. Go ahead and check your answers. Write down anything you got wrong and questions. Put a question mark so we can go over any questions that you have in class. So that's how we go from words to numbers. Next, we're going to talk about how do you go from numbers to words. So we're going to skip over these practices. We'll go over those in class. I'm going to come down to where it says write numbers in word form. So our first example is, let's say that we had something like 32.65. 32.65. How would we write that in word form? Before we write that, let's write down one quick key point. That's important. I'm going to write that down here. A quick key point that I want you to remember. And that key point is this, that all numbers (21 to 99) need a hyphen. All numbers 21 to 29 or to 99 need a hyphen. So for example, a number like 32 would look like this. 30 hyphen 2. 23, we would put a hyphen. That's what a hyphen looks like. Obviously, a number like 70, that doesn't need a hyphen. That's just one word. But if you had 71, that would need a hyphen. So how are we going to write this in word form? The first thing I would do is let's look at the first part, to the left of the decimal. We see 32, and I'm just going to write that out. 32. Now, 32 falls in between 21 and 99, so I'm going to hyphen that. 30 hyphen 2. I see a decimal, so I'm going to put the word and, 32, and. The next thing I would do is look and say, okay, what is the number after the decimal? I see the number 65, so I'm just going to write out that number. 60 hyphen 5. And the last step is you have to write out a word that tells us what's the last place value of your number. So right now, this 5 is 2 places after the decimal. 2 places. So what is that? We have the tenths place and we have the hundredths place. So this number, we're going to write at the very end of the number, hundredths, because that tells us what the place value of that last number in our number is. So hundredths is going to go at the end. So this number would be 32 and 65 hundredths. That hundredth part is the part that a lot of students forget, and that's a really important part. The last word you write should be the place value. Last word is place value. Alright, let's do one more example. So let's say you had a number like 14.012. 14.012. What would that look like? First thing I'm going to do is just write out the first the number I see to the left of the decimal, which is the number 14. So I'm going to write out 14. I see a decimal, so I'm going to put the word and. 14 and. Now, I see the number 12. I see this 0 here, but the other number I see is 12, so I'm going to write out 12. And then I have to figure out, well, what is my place value going to be? I'm 1, 2, 3 spaces, place values after the decimal. And I know that that's the tenths, hundredths, thousandths place. So I'm going to write 14 and 12 thousandths. 14 and 12 thousandths. All right, so go ahead and pause the video. And I want you to go ahead and try a couple of different practices. The practices that I want you to do are right down here below. And I want you to try and do practice 1, practice 2, and practice 3. Try those 3 practices. Pause the video. When you're ready, press play, and you can see the answers. All right, here are your answers to practices 1, 2, and 3. Double check that you have hyphens in the right place. Remember that any time that you have a number between 21 and 99 that is 2 words together, you need a hyphen. So, for example, 75 here needs a hyphen, or 87. Double check those hyphens, and also double check that you have the correct word at the end, that you use your THS word, like thousandths or hundredths. Alright, one last thing we want to talk about with place value is the kind of problems that you might see that are a little bit more complex, and that is combining operations and place value. So before we go over an example, I want to just quickly review what some different words might mean. You might see the word sum. The word sum, that means addition. You might see the word difference. And that's going to mean subtraction. You might see the word product. And that means time. And you might see the word quotient, which is one that we often have a little bit of trouble with because we're not used to seeing it. And that means divide. So let's go back over here to our operations and place value. And I'm just going to do one example and have you guys do try one. So it says, what is the product of 653 and 0.36? So remember, product means time. So what it wants us to do is it wants us to multiply these two numbers. So we're going to find the product of 653 times 0.36. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we can just use our calculator for this. 653 times 0.36 gives us 235.08. And then there's some questions we need to answer. What is the value of the number? So in the tenths place. And notice I'm using cups as I go through these because I want to underline things and circle things that are important. So it's asking you, what's the number in the tenths place? Well, I know the tenths place is 1 after the decimal. So that means that the number in the tenths place is 0. Then it asks us, what is the value of the number in the tens place? Now, a common misconception is people think, oh, since 0 is the tenths place, that means that this right here, that must be the tens place. That's false. Remember, the 5 is in the ones place. The tens place is going to be our 3. All right, let's do one more example. Let's see example 2. It says the sum, so we're finding the sum. I know that means addition. The sum of 304 tenths and 65 300ths. Now, we're translating now. We have to translate these words into numbers. So let's go ahead and write that right above there. We have 300. The word and tells me a decimal. 4 tenths, that means that I have 1 after the decimal, so I'm going to fill that in with a 4. 304 tenths and 65 and, fill in my decimal, 300ths. Hundredths is 2 places after the decimal. So I know I need to put my 3 here and fill in with a 0. So my two numbers that I'm adding together are 300.4 and 65 300ths. I'm finding the sum, so I'm going to go ahead and add those together. Go ahead on your own calculator, add these two numbers together. And we get 365 and 43 hundredths. Let's go ahead and answer these questions. What is the value of the number in the hundredths place? Hundredths with the THS. I know hundredths is 2 after the decimal, so that's going to be 3. And what is the value of the number in the ones place? The ones place is where the right to the left of the decimal, and that is 5. Okay, I want you to go ahead and try practice number 1. Go ahead and pause the video, try practice 1, and then when you're ready, press play, and you can see the answer. Okay, quotient means divide, so we should have divided. And what is the value of the number in the hundredths place? That would be 5. And in the thousandths place, that would be 8. Okay, that concludes our video on place value and rounding. Please make sure that you go back over your notes and write down any questions that you have and come ready to class to practice.